This is the 18 Strong Podcast with Jeff Pellizzero, episode number 40.
Welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast, where you get direct access to the world's greatest experts on training harder, practicing smarter, and playing better golf. Now, here's your host, Jeff Pellizzero.
Hey, what's up, 18 Strong golfers? This is Jeff Pellizzero, golf fitness professional and physical therapist, and your host for the 18 Strong Podcast. As always, thanks for showing up. I've got a very exciting guest today, one of the biggest names in the world of golf fitness, and that is Ben Shear from Ben Shear Golf. And Ben is going to talk about all the great stuff that he has going on, the tour players that he's working with. You've probably seen or read or heard a lot of Ben's stuff, and he really is one of the forefathers in the golf performance arena and even in sports performance. But Ben has definitely specified his training in the golf world and is really working with some of the best out there. And today, surprisingly, we're going to talk about a few things that might be contrary to what you're reading in a lot of the magazines and what you're seeing, and what Ben actually saw at the PGA show, and was this need for speed. And Ben's going to talk about why you don't necessarily need to train for speed in your golf swing, and that training for speed and trying to speed up or trying to get your swing speed faster could actually be very detrimental to not just your game but also to your health. And then we also discuss the fact that stretching for an individual that is very tight and inflexible, that stretching may not be your best course of action. We're going to talk about some other techniques that you can get into and can most likely be more effective. And if you've been stretching for years and years and you haven't seen any improvements, I'm talking specifically to you, because if you have been stretching for a long time and you're not making the changes, you're not fixing the problem that you're intending to fix, it's not going to change. It's not going to get any better if you just keep doing the same old thing. So we're going to talk about a few ways and idea changes that you can start working on in the gym or seek out some professional help with. And so we've got a great interview with Ben. If you are new to the podcast, 18 Strong, head on over to 18strong.com. You'll get all kinds of information. We've got articles. We've got tons of podcasts. This is actually the 40th episode, which is hard to believe. We had an incredible week here with the 18 Strong podcast. Had our first single day, 24 hours, where we had over 1,200 downloads of the 18 Strong podcast, which was a huge breakthrough, and can't wait to see what happens with all the new listeners and everybody that are listening to the 18 Strong podcast. So if you're one of them, thank you for showing up. Hopefully we'll continue to keep a lot of great guests coming, and go back in the archives and listen to some of the old shows, because we've got some great guests back there. And I'm going to ask all of you out there for 3 favors. If you have not yet done these, I'm going to ask you to go over to the 18 Strong page on Facebook, like us over there, follow us on Twitter at 18 Strong, and subscribe to the podcast in iTunes. All of these things are really going to help get the word out on the 18 Strong podcast, and will allow me to find more guests like Ben and other individuals that are doing great things in the world of golf and the fitness world, nutrition, so we can help you make your game better, make your fitness level better, and basically just make your life better. The better you move, the better your fitness is, the better your health is, the better both your life and your game are going to be. So I hope you enjoy this interview with Ben, and I'll catch you on the other side. All right, everybody, welcome to the 18 Strong podcast, and we've got a special guest for you today, Ben Shear from Ben Shear Golf. Ben, thanks for coming on the show today.
Hey, Jeff, pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And to all the listeners out there, you guys have most likely heard Ben's name, seen Ben's stuff in Golf Digest magazine, heard him on the Golfer's Edge radio show on PGA Tour Radio. So, Ben, if you could, give the audience a little idea of your background. I know you work with a lot of tour players such as Luke Donald, Jason Day, Webb Simpson, Russell Henley, some of those guys. But I'd like to hear the story of you and how you got into golf. I know you worked with a lot of other sports as well. And what's led you to the point where you are now?
Yeah, I think that what's interesting about golf and how I kind of got into the golf, I was obviously doing training, and unlike, typical trainer, I really wasn't interested in typically doing the housewife type training or whatever. I wanted to work with athletes. And, when I started doing this, 20 plus years ago, that wasn't really something people did. I think me and Mike Boyle and a couple of people in the whole country were the only ones who there were no sports training facilities. Those things didn't even exist. And so when I opened up my sports performance center called Athletic Edge, 20 years ago, what I quickly realized is like, wow, this is a really bad business model. It's like, why the velocities and accelerations and all those gyms have gone out of business. It's like, well, you can't just be in business from 3:30 in the afternoon until 8:30 at night and pay your overhead. That's kind of really a silly business concept. So I was like, well, I really don't want to do kind of bodybuilding, weight loss type training. That's not really where my interest lies. I like the more performance-based model. I said, so who's available kind of during the other hours of the day,
right,
to allow me to make some money the rest of the day? And so I started thinking, well, what are the other sports? So I was like, well, the country club sports, tennis, golf, those types of things allowed me to tap into people maybe who could come in the mornings. Some people, even some of the moms, mothers or whatever you want to say, who are available after they drop their kids off to school, who might be playing tennis at the country club. They're into golf, whatever it is. The businessman before work who's a golfer, that those were a great business model to be in. So I started getting into working with those people. So now I had a morning clientele and an evening clientele, and that was a lot better business model. And as I started digging into golf, my obsession of always trying to be really good at what I do, as I started really digging into golf, I started studying golf biomechanics. I started looking, I met Dave and Greg, Dave would come in my gym a bunch. He used to live in New Jersey back in the day. I went down with some golf pros that I were friend with to club golf and met Greg, long before there was ever a TPI. And I was working with golfers. I liked some of the stuff he was doing. He liked some of the stuff I was doing, et cetera. And as I kept digging, I really found that I was fascinated by golf. And what was cool about golf was like, there's actually research out there. There's actually information, like unlike other sports. It's like, wow, there's some really cool stuff out here and I can actually learn. And like guys have actually done biomechanics research and people have actually done all this cool stuff. So I got kind of wound up and I was like, none of the other sports really had that much cool information. And obviously golf, because of the finances of the game, has a lot of really good information that's out there. And as I got, wound up in the learning, I just found myself fascinated by it. And someone even recently asked me, they're like, why do you work with so many golfers? I work with guys, I work with Olympians, guys in the NHL. You name it, pretty much every professional sport, quarterbacks in the NFL, you name it. And people are like, why do you love golf so much? I say, what's cool about golf is like, it's got this rotary ballistic power of a shot putter on the high end.
Right.
Yet you have this fine motor control of a marksman at the same time. And no other sport really bring those things together the way golf does. Look, I'm not trying to knock the football guys, but if I want to train a football lineman to push the guy across the line from him, I have to do a really good job in basic power development and strength development, but it's not all that sophisticated, to do it. It's to do it well is still a skill, but it's not nearly as complex because you don't have to have the fine motor control over your movements the way you do in golf. And, my belief is, and I know, there's a big pushback now against sports specific. We went from a world where there was no such thing as sports specific, and then we went off the deep end with sports specific. Now we're pushing back to the other side. There is no sports specific, right? Again, look, if you want to sit there and micromanage specificity, we certainly can say, there is nothing specific other than practice or play, right? For sure, that's the only thing that's truly 100% specific. But at the same time, I do think that using things that are similar and can be controlled properly, if done right, again, you can do specificity wrong, but if done right, I think the more fine motor control the sport has, the more specificity benefits you. The more gross motor sport the game is, the less the need for specificity, I guess.
Sure.
Is how I would think about it.
Sure. Gotcha. So I want to touch base on your newer facility, which is Golf and Body, and that's in Manhattan, right?
Yeah, Golf and Body NYC. Pretty cool place.
Golf and Body NYC, because I know that I've seen pictures of it. I've seen articles on it. Explain to the listeners, it's basically an indoor golf club in Manhattan. So kind of explain what it is you guys do there and just all the cool toys that you have.
Yeah, so I'm the director of performance over there. I think about it the way we would describe it maybe is an urban country club. We have 7 simulators, 3 indoor putting greens. We have a 3,500 square foot gym that has everything from, basic circuit type stuff to Kaiser machines, squat racks, Olympic stuff, Vertimaxes to Woodway treadmills to Versa climbers to rowers to slide boards to, the most functional type stuff that you can imagine on the market. So we have a pretty broad Jacob's ladder, you name it. I mean, pretty broad selection of stuff. So we have something for everybody. And our goal there is to really do what I think all of us, yourself, myself, whatever we're all trying to do is like get people to play golf based on their body's ability to perform, right? Like this is what you can do. This is what you should do. We're going to help you get better. But, look, I think that we, in our world, where at least golf and body, because we have fitness people, medical people, and golf instructors all under one roof, we can really try to bring the information together and all get on the same page. I think that some of the faults, some of us on our side, and I include myself in that we've made over the years is like, we think we can fix everybody, right? Like you come in and you do your screen and like, oh, look, I'm going to, you have this problem and that problem, I'm going to fix you. And it's like, look, some 50-year-old guy shows up at your office and he's been sitting behind the desk for 35 years for 50 hours a week. And he's like, well, I'm going to come see you for 2 hours a week, but yet I'm still going to work. If you tell me that you're going to fix his T-spine, I'm going to say, you better show me that. I mean, I have not seen anybody be able to do it. I think that's just smoke and mirrors, to be honest. Yep. And we sell that to clients and we say, look, you have this T-spine rotation or extension or whatever limitation. And look, can we help that guy? Yes. Can we make him hopefully move a little bit better? Yes. But are we going to take a guy who can't turn his torso at all and then give him a 90-degree shoulder turn? No, you're not. Okay? I mean, there's no 2 hours in a week. None of us are that skilled. Like, I like to think I'm really good at it, but I'm not that good at it.
Right.
So I think that we also give people a lot of false hope. And I think as golf fitness evolves, I think we also need to start understanding some practicalities of what we do and not just sell people this, we're going to fix you mentality.
Right. Well, I think that kind of plays perfectly into what I think is going to be a main topic of our conversation today. And I've referenced this several times on the podcast, a post that you made that you put on Facebook. And it was, I think, right after you came back from the PGA show. And it was something to the effect of, the PGA show had some amazing demonstrations there. But one theme that you saw was this need for speed, and everybody's trying to gain more club head speed. And what you mentioned was the fact that that's kind of a possibly a worrisome thought that all these people are going to be trying to just swing out of their shoes, and that can very well lead to some possible injuries in the future. Can you kind of expand on what you saw there, and then what you were talking about in that post?
Yeah. So let me first by saying I think that most adult men, not women, but most adult men who are reasonably healthy, even with limitations in mobility, blood stability, blah, blah, blah. I think most adult men, assuming nothing crazy going on, let's say between, 25 and 55 years old, can hit the ball far enough if they have reasonably good technique to shoot par. Mm-hmm. So let me start with that. They don't need to hit the ball farther. They have enough ability to hit the ball far enough to shoot par. So let's start with that.
That's a good point.
So let's, so it's farther. It's like, no. There's plenty of other areas of your game that can use improvement, that can bring your scores way down. You can chip better, you can putt better, you can hit your iron straighter, you can hit your driver not farther, straighter, put it in play, all of those things, right? So if I start with the premise that I think most men have the ability to shoot par, and as you know, as well as I know, that most people that we assess have all kinds of physical limitations.
Absolutely.
Right? So we know they have limitations. We know, but yet, even with all that, they're still strong enough and could hit it far enough with the right technique, with even the way their body moves, to shoot par. Yet everybody loves to hit it farther, right? That's sexy. We all want to do is say, I'm going to make you hit it farther. And here's the problem from the client perspective, meaning if you come to me to hit the ball farther, and understand that, number one, the farther you hit it, the more speed you have, the better you have to be. And what I mean by that is it's triangulation. A 10-degree miss, right, is a 10-degree miss, right? So a 10-degree miss at 250 yards might be in the right side of the fairway, right? It's triangulation. The ball keeps going further and further out on the same degree, right, on that same angle. It's triangulation. So a 10-degree miss at the typical guy maybe can hit a 240, 250. That might be on the right side of the fairway. At 300, that's in the woods. Mm-hmm. It's why most women who drive the ball 150, what do they come to you when they come to you and talk to you? Well, I hit it really straight. I just need to hit it farther. It's like, no, you really don't hit it very straight. But triangulation hasn't allowed it to go far enough offline yet. Right. It's the same thing. At a short distance, they don't hit it straight. If you got them to hit it 70 yards farther, they would be in the woods. Right. But they believe they hit it straight, but they don't really hit it straight. Their degree of miss is the same. Okay. So I think we understand distance and straight and all of that stuff with a kind of a skewed view of what straight is and what far is. And understand that if you're going to get more speed, you better be better. Your TrackMan, your impact alignments, not that you need the technology, but your impact alignments need to improve the more speed you develop. Because of the triangulation example I just gave you, right? So if I want to hit it 25 yards farther, my scatter pattern is going to get wider unless my impact alignments get better.
Right.
So with that being said, and I'll tie back to what we originally started, says we know all these people come in. I'm sure you see it. I see it. Oh, I got T-spine problems. I got hip problems. I got core instability. Right? The list goes on. And that's not uncommon. That's really the reality of the typical golfer. It's why he has neck pain, back pain, shoulder pain. He's taking 3 Advil before he plays. He's taking 3 Advil after. He can only play one day, can't play the day after. All of the stuff that we see day in and day out in the fitness world and the therapy world and all of those things, right? So I go to the golf show, and I'm excited to go, and I love going there because there's, the smartest and a lot of the greatest teachers and all that stuff. And as a fitness guy, I spend a lot of time watching teachers because I think I learn more from them at this point. I love to go still do fitness and medical type stuff, but at the same time, I want to see what's being taught.
Right.
Like, what are these people actually asking my person to go do?
Yeah.
That's kind of important for me to understand. And what are the best teachers in the world who are the one disseminating information down to the other teachers? What are they telling people they should do? So I went and watched force plate, seminars by top teachers, 3D seminars, all of these types of biomechanics, blah, blah, blah. And all everybody talks about is how you hit it farther, how you create more ground force, how you create more torque, how you create increased lever arms, all of these cool things, right? And it sounds really cool. It's like, wow, that's really good. Well, maybe, right? So my thing is, in all of engineering, right? Form dictates function. Most of these people's form cannot withstand those forces. If you start putting more force through their body, they're going to be more hurt, not less hurt. We're kind of putting the cart before the horse. Again, we can't even fix all of these people. Like I said earlier, maybe we can help them, but we may not be able to fix them all. And then saying, oh, look, in your weight shift, I want you to move your hips, 5 inches left while your upper body stays back to increase that distance, kind of what, Manziel and some of those guys are talking about now. And that's what Jim McLean 15 years ago called Y factor. Does it help you hit it farther? Yeah. And if you have the body of a tour player, should you probably do that? Yeah. Right. But if you're a 45-year-old, 50-year-old guy who sits behind a desk all week and has all the limits that we just talked about, should you be doing that? Hell no, you should not be doing that. That is killing you. And your desire to hit it farther is killing you. You have the ability already in that body to shoot par, like I said. Go learn to chip. Go hit putt. Go hit it straighter. Be a better course manager. There's so many components to golf to bringing your score down beyond hitting it farther. Our desire to put that above all else is why the typical golfer is busted up. And I love the science part. But I think, unfortunately, we still teach golf too much from an ideological viewpoint and looking at what the best players in the world do and then trying to stick everybody else and have them duplicate it. The example I give to people all the time is that if you came to me to take up your 45-year-old guy, you got all these physical limitations, say, look, I want to take up basketball. Would I ask you to do what Michael Jordan does? You would laugh at me, right? You'd be like, what, are you crazy? I can't do that. Or if I said, look, we're going to take up hockey, but I ask you to go do what Sidney Crosby does, you would laugh at me. But because that little ball sits on a tee and it's not moving, we perceive that we should be able to do what Adam Scott does or Tiger Woods does or any of these players. And the reality is the complexity of the golf swing is no different from a physical skill to do, how tough it is to truly do. Have all those motions, range of motions in all those joints, accelerate, decelerate the club, all the things that we love to talk about as, golf fitness and biomechanics type people. It's a really complex task to do, right? You want to start from 0 miles an hour, swing it back, transition, get that thing going 100 plus miles an hour and be dead stopped and balanced at the end, yet align it perfectly in your impact alignments. That's a pretty complex task, right? So if in any other sport I asked you, I'm going to learn to play quarterback and throw a football. If I'm going to teach you to throw a football, I wouldn't teach you to try to be Peyton Manning, right? So why do we believe in golf that it's any different, right? So those guys are outliers, right? Tour players are outliers. They're freaks. They're genetic freaks. These guys are amazing. Not only do they have unbelievable physical ability, they have unbelievable talent, motor control. I mean, all of the things that we love to talk about, right? But the guy who sits behind his desk all week and doesn't have all that stuff, why do we believe that we should be trying to study the best players in the world and have them do what these guys do? We should be studying them and figure out what's the optimal way for them to do it. And that's my concern, because I think that when you try to make them do this outlier mindset, they are getting nothing but getting injured. And the problem lies in the student, in that when they do get a hold of one and they hit it great, it's the best shot they ever hit in their life. They don't take into account the triangulation conversation we had earlier that says, wow, I actually just hit 15 more balls deeper into the woods, right? They just, that one that goes down the middle, they catch it all. They go, oh my God, that was the greatest shot I ever hit in my life. And that's what keeps them coming back, right? Golf is all about that one shot, believing that one can become two, and the two can become four, and the four can become eight, whatever it is, right? And that's what we're holding on to, and that's what they're holding on to. But my whole point is, like, I don't really care about that at the end of the day. I think that that's all smoke and mirrors to reality, and that our jobs as fitness professionals, medical professionals, should be saying, hey, look, form does dictate function. Let's understand what your form can do, and let's figure out what's optimal for the way your body moves. And that could mean moving side to side. One of the things we talk about that, in TPI, obviously we'll talk about slides and sways. Well, those things have become curse words.
Yeah, you're right.
Hal Sutton and Rocco Mediate moved a ton laterally. Some of the greatest players who have ever played this game moved side to side a ton. They just called it loading to the right and moving into the ball. Now that we've called them slide and sway, all of a sudden those are the devil's words, right? And the reality is, for a lot of people who don't have hip rotation, so what are the two biggest things? I'll ask you. What are the two biggest things? If I give you two things of all the patients you see, clients you see, what are the two biggest limitations you see?
I'd say hip rotation for sure, internal rotation.
Okay.
And I would say the ability to hinge from the hips properly or maintain a good posture.
Okay. So I'm going to say hip. I agree with you 100% hip rotation and trunk rotation. Mm-hmm. Well, if I can't rotate my hips and I can't rotate my trunk, how am I? So instead of calling this moving laterally bad, why don't we figure out how to use that to our advantage?
Right.
If I'm limited moving in rotary, well, guess what? Moving side to side, guys have won major championships, by the way, doing that. Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's not be delusional, but we've put this stigma of, oh, that's sliding, that's swaying, you're a bad boy, right? It's like, no. You need to move laterally to create speed, to do certain things, to actually have a chance to have consistent ball striking and a chance to play good golf and generate enough speed to actually do it. So I think that we label things. Jimmy Ballard taught that for a lifetime, right? He was a pretty good teacher.
Yeah.
And we have the tendency as a public to emulate the greatest players of all time, right? So Tiger started turning and kind of the modern golf swing came. It's partly driven by the equipment itself. And then Tiger came and had this big coil back in the day with Butch and turned, and now always everybody should do that. Well, look, Jack, you see anybody lift up their front heel anymore?
No.
Jack did that.
Bubba, maybe one. Bubba.
Yeah, maybe Bubba, right? Jack did that. He was pretty good, right? And if you release your front foot, you know what? That takes a lot of stress off your body.
Yep.
The modern golf swing is the worst thing in the world for the amateur golfer. So all this stuff that we love to talk about that's biomechanically the most efficient is also the most brutal, most of it on the body, for the typical person who doesn't have the proper mobility and stability to actually execute that in a good way. Look, if Jack played today with today's modern equipment, the guy would be hitting it 360 yards. He was hitting it 310 back then with garbage golf balls and horrible golf shafts. Can you imagine where this guy would by releasing his front foot? So I think that we've lost sight of some really important concepts in the game.
So when you have somebody say, your typical golfer comes in and they tell you, I want to swing faster or whatever, and you kind of explain some of this stuff to them. What are some of the points that you instill in them, and what are the directions that you think most golfers could benefit from? Like, what are some of the basic things this is what we're most likely going to work on, and how do you screen certain things for them, and what can you give the audience that they might want to focus on if they're not going to see somebody like you or me, but what can they go in the gym and do right off the bat that will start helping them either move better, swing a little bit better from a gym standpoint?
Yeah, look, I mean, one thing that I kind of have always been, and people can like it or not like it, whatever, it doesn't matter to me, is, I'm a big stability guy. I think a lot of people are spending way too much time stretching, to be honest. I think that, when you break out, is it a mobility or is it a stability problem? If everybody just did some basic foam rolling for soft tissue work from a mobility perspective, and then got focused on their stability work, I think they would get a lot more results than spending a lot of time stretching. I really find that for most of the amateurs we work with, they're like, I stretch. I'm like, well, I give a talk, and I don't know if you've ever seen me speak or whatever, on what it is. And I always say, I start by who in this room is tight? I do a talk called Why Am I Tight? Right. And I say, who in this room is tight? And, everybody raises their hand. And, I did this at the TPI World Golf Fitness Summit, and 700 people in the room. I, raise your hand, and 600 people raise their hand. And I'm like, how many of you stretch? And, 600 people keep their hands up. And I'm like, okay, have you been stretching for a month? Keep your hand up. 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And there's guys up their hand up. And 10 years later, they're telling me that they're still tight, and yet they stretch all the time. I'm like, well, at what point do you say that's not working? And I'm not saying stretching is bad, but if it's the right thing, it should work.
Right. That's exactly right. I love that you just made that point.
Yeah, it's like it should work. It's like if 10 years later, you're still telling me I can't touch my toes, I can't do this, I can't do that, it's not a mobility problem. And unfortunately, I think that that's more common than the other side. Mm-hmm. But yet I'm not saying you shouldn't start with mobility. That's fine. But to me, I more frequently see the stability limitation than I do the true mobility limitation. And if I can get people doing some, basic ankle mobs and some foam rolling, mm-hmm. And then get them on a good stability program, their range of motion and their movements get way better.
Right. Than
sitting there and stretching until their eyeballs want to pop out of their head. I just, I've not found that to be the most successful way to help people, improve. So, my thing is like, we've been so conditioned as a public, like stretching's the cure for everything, right? Oh, I have people come in and say, oh, I pulled my hamstring, I'm gonna stretch it out. I'm like, what? So you overstretched your hamstring and now it hurts, and the cure is to stretch it more. But people don't even think about that, right? No. It's like, wow. So where are we really going with some of this stuff? And I feel like we need to kind of just actually think about what we're saying, think about what we're doing. And I think that if you get some stability, which, we can call just control of your motion, motor control, whatever you want. I always give people an example. I'm like, look, how loose would you be if you ran across ice? You would be pretty tight. Mm-hmm. Right? So if I put you in an unstable environment, you tighten up. I'm not saying you're not tight. The question is, why are you tight? Right. And so my advice to anybody out there is, if you're a guy who in my questionnaire is raising their hand and has been stretching for 5 years and you're still tight, that's not your problem. So, start looking at stability as a solution as opposed to mobility to that problem.
Yeah, I was just having a conversation with one of the guys who works at our place about the idea that, when you're on a good strength training program and you're going through, full range of motion, working on the eccentric portion and really working on controlled movements, full ranges, you tend to see those individuals get more flexible than they have been in years if they're not used to a program like that. And it's the load under tension, good postures, and just kind of cueing and working on that stuff. And you start to stabilize, and once you start to stabilize, your body can kind of let go and take you into those motions. So I think you're spot on there.
Yeah, so I think for the public, that's still a paradigm shift. Those of us, who, kind of in the know or whatever, that might not sound so shocking to you. Mm-hmm. But I think the typical golfer out there listening still thinks that stretching is the only, I don't stretch enough. It's like, well, you stretch every day.
Right.
You've been stretching for 5 years. Well, how much is enough? It's like, no, it should work.
Right.
And if it's not, and I'm not, so again, my point is not saying don't stretch. My point is, if you stretch, it should make a change. And if it doesn't make a change, that's not the problem.
Right. It's time to think of something different. All right, so I want to talk about a couple of the other tools that you use that I'm not super familiar with, but I know that one of them is the red cord, and I'd like for the audience to hear a little bit more about that, and I'm curious to ask you a few questions on that. And then the other is the neuromuscular reactivation techniques that you use. I saw that on your website, and that's a lot of the stuff that you use with some of your players. So if you could first, let's talk about the NRT and just what it is and how you use it, and then we'll jump into the red cord stuff.
So I actually do MAT, which is muscle activation.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I thought I saw it on your website that it was NRT. Sorry. Okay, no, so MAT. Okay.
Yeah. So it's basically a kinesiology type system, right? And again, it's simplistically kind of talking about what we're talking about, trying to create range of motion by increasing stability, right? So it's a manual therapy type of program where, and look, it doesn't have to be. You can use isometrics. There's various ways you can activate muscles, right? We all have tools to activate muscles. Like you talked about slow controlled motions under load, isometrics. I mean, there's lots of ways to activate, muscles, but the concept is basically we have a very systematic way of assessing the body through range of motion assessments, muscle testing, etc. And then we can simply go in and from a quicker perspective, we can go in and do simple palpations at attachment sites of specific muscles. It's a very biomechanical approach. If I do internal hip, straight leg internal hip rotation, I can say, where's my axis of rotation at the hip? What muscle sits on top of that axis? Oh, anterior fibers of glute medius. I go in there to the attachment points at the trochanter and the top of the iliac crest. I palpate those things. I get the muscles in the brain talking, and boom, all of a sudden it starts moving. Then I get up into my exercise and start trying to, again, get that to hold and reinforce those patterns.
Gotcha. So kind of like you're turning on the firing patterns, turning on the system, because I know a lot of the listeners were just like, whoa, what language is he speaking there? But basically, yeah, you're just kind of triggering things, turning them on, and then kind of getting it ready for whatever movement it's going to be, whether that be a workout or the golf swing or that type of stuff. And is that kind of what a lot of the stuff that you do when you're on the tour working with these guys, when hands-on stuff there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't do a lot of the hands-on stuff. Most of these guys have full-time guys traveling with them, hands-on on the tour. I think of what that hands-on work is kind of wiring, right? I'm just connecting the wires for them. Right. Right, and then the gym is where we kind of put more power through the wires. Gotcha. But most of the guys travel with their own. Most of the guys that I work with have full-time therapists as well that travel with them on the tour. I kind of pick and choose my weeks and go out there and visit guys at home and put programs together, spend some time with them, and then they work on it for a while, and then I check in with them. So those guys need that kind of, the wear and tear out on the road is very hard for these tour guys, sleeping in strange beds, flying on airplanes. I mean, hitting balls 6 hours a day. I mean, you need soft tissue work just from a, just constant stress and repetitive stress problem. So most of those guys are getting their soft tissue work done by those guys. So I kind of, on the tour, stay more on the pure fitness side, but in my facility, I do that. But in golf and body, we have a full-time chiro PT who does that. We have massage therapists. I run the fitness center at Baltusrol, the performance center at Baltusrol as well. And I have a full-time massage therapist in there. So, I'm a big believer in good soft tissue and that kind of stuff as well, just from a repetitive stress problem. It's a huge issue for a lot of people who hit a lot of balls.
Sure. And then, so let's talk about the red cord, because originally when I saw and heard about red cord, I thought, okay, suspension system, like the rings or a TRX. But then I kind of, watched one of your videos on your website and looked at a few things, and it's way more involved than I ever thought it was. So if you could explain the red cord to us a little.
Yeah, so red cord is a suspension training system, like all of the things that you mentioned, which are all really cool, great training devices, but it's then also 1,000 times more. So anything that you can do on your TRX or your rings, I can do better. Right. kind of thing, right? I like rings better than I like TRX, as an example. And I'm not bashing TRX. It's a great tool. It's portable. There's a lot of great exercises. But the one thing, again, without trying to make it too technical for the listeners, is that when you use a single strap system, the force is somewhere between the two hands. Let's just say I was doing a push-up, that I'm not loading over each specific joint. We have what's called a resultant force, meaning the force is somewhere in between those 2 points as I do the exercise. Where if I did rings or I did the red cord, because each of the handles is independent, I can actually put the force load directly over the joints and the muscles I want them to work on.
Gotcha.
So I think it's a more biomechanically correct movement system versus a single strap system, number one. That's like at its most basic level. But basically, red cord was originally a physical therapy tool created in Norway 20 plus years ago. And, you can have something that's as simple as a similar version to rings in a TRX, which is what we call the Red Cord Mini. Mm-hmm. Then we have ways that you can hook a pulley system into it where the ropes are actually running it. You can do rotary type unstable movements, rotational movements, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Then
you can have multiple suspension points where you start totally suspending the person in the air. But at the same time, it also has a bungee system where I can offload. So one of the big problems we have in the exercise world is we're really good with progressions, like how to make exercises harder. But when somebody can't do the most basic thing, we don't really have a solution to that. We don't have good regressions. Like, okay, well, I really want to do this type of movement, and the person can't do it. Well, I can't make them lighter than they are. Right. Kind of body weight's the bottom of the line. Right. So what's cool about this is it actually has a bungee type system that I can actually be partially offloading and lifting your body weight up. If I was doing a side plank as an example, or whatever, I can have you doing it, and underneath your pelvis, I could put a big wide sling that has bungee cords attached to the ropes that is actually partly lifting you up off the ground. So, obviously on the ground, once I go to like short lever and my knee's on the ground, it's like, well, now where do I go?
Right.
So I can actually regress people down to as low of a level as I want. So there's basically nothing that I could do in those suspension type movements that I cannot do. I can lower your body weight to pretty much as low as I want and start building you up all the way through these progressions, through these, they have professional workstations, what they call tandems, single stations, minis. So there's a whole lot of really cool stuff you can do, within there. That's great. And the other thing it has is when you have two independent ropes, it actually has a sling where I can sling the two ropes together, which allows me to get into a lot of sideline type stuff, which you really can't do with a TRX or a single strap type system, which is great when you want to start working the lateral parts of our body, et cetera. And, one of the things I think that we really don't spend enough time looking at is just side bending for our golfers, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I always laugh that, I very rarely see somebody do an assessment for a golfer that looks at side bend. It's like, wow, side bend's kind of important in golf.
Yeah.
Right? And even side bend coupled with rotation. Mm-hmm. And so looking at it independently and then looking at it in coupled with rotation. As a right-handed golfer, my backswing is right trunk rotation, left side bend, and down is left trunk rotation, right side bend. Well, if I have a limitation or a weakness in any of those areas or lack of stability or mobility or whatever, I've got a problem. But most typical golf assessments don't even look at that.
Right.
Which I find shocking.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty much straight plane, rotation, front, back, that kind of stuff, but not really looking at the side bending. Yeah, absolutely right. Well, that's interesting because I've always found that when trying to back down an exercise or, even say like your simple pull-up or something like that, we've got a girl at the gym that is really, really working hard on trying to do a pull-up. But, you get the big suspension bands to help or whatever, and it's like, well, now that thing's so strong, it just pulls her all the way up forward and trying to find something to back down the resistance. But it's also a great point that you make that if you can't do a certain exercise, and we've talked about this several times on the show, if you can't do a certain exercise, you got to kind of back it down, break it down to where you do have some assistance. I mean, even something as simple, I've got an elderly woman in the gym and she can't get in a proper bridge position, on her back, feet on the floor, trying to lift her butt in the air, but having something to just kind of assist with that lift and let her feel her glutes firing and hamstrings kick in a little bit. Just that makes it so much easier to then progress her. So having a tool like that, I could see how that would be very, very beneficial. Yeah,
so in your example, like I could technically have my ropes hanging down. I could hook the two bungee cords in the sling, and I literally put it right underneath her butt or under her hips, and it's pulling her up.
Right.
And you say, okay, go up, and it's just giving her whatever. And what's cool is there's multiple level bungees. They're multiple thicknesses, and I can adjust the length of my rope itself, so how much I have. So, I can micro kind of, set those parameters of how much I want and increase, really in small incremental changes, which people who maybe are at that level of weakness, they need to be able to micro progress. They can't just jump from, the 10-pounder to the 20-pounder kind of, mentality. It's like, no, 10 to 20, that's like, 0 to 100 for them.
Right.
I need to go to 10 to 10.5 to 11 to 11.5. So it really gives me a lot of control over those types of things, which I've found to be super valuable.
Exactly. All right, Ben, I know you've always got a lot of different projects going on, different things with the radio show. So I always like to ask the listeners, what has you most excited for this year, 2015, and the upcoming months and what you have going on?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm always excited all this stuff going on. I have a lot of projects, like you said. I do Golf Digest, I do the radio show. But, from a day-to-day work in the tour guys, but from a day-to-day work, I go to Golf and Body a couple days a week. I have my own facility, Athletic Edge in New Jersey. And then I also run the Performance Center in Baltusrol. But the biggest thing is I'm making a huge change at my own personal facility that I've had for 20 years at Athletic Edge. And, I think one of the interesting things in the industry, and a lot of people are afraid to ask for money. And as trainers and therapists, and a lot of people are afraid to basically tell people what they should do. But yet on the other side, I think that most clients want to be told what to do. Mm-hmm. I think most people come to us for our professional opinions. That's why they're coming to see you.
Right.
So I'm changing my business model to a business model where when you come to our facility, you're going to do it all. You're going to do soft tissue. You're going to do nutrition. You're going to do training. So it's no longer like, I want to do some training. I'd like to talk to nutrition. No, you're going to get on a program, and it's going to include everything.
Nice.
And everybody who walks through the door is going to be in a comprehensive program. And I sat down with one of the business guys, development guys I work with. He's like, well, why do you think your tour players have had success? Or why do you think this Olympian had success? Or whatever. And I tell him all the things we do. He goes, okay, well, that's your program.
Yeah.
I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, no. You make these people do all of these things. That's why they get such great results. He's like, well, that's your business. He goes, that's what regular people want too. They want results.
Right.
And, if you're eating crap and working out, you might not get good results, right? Or if you have all this soft tissue issues and you're lifting hard and you're not getting any soft tissue work, that's going to cause a different problem, right? There's all of these things cause different problems. And when you put all the pieces together is really where the magic starts to happen. So we're actually changing our business model starting by the fall. We've been doing some construction, fixing the place up, bringing in some new staff, doing some things. So I'm really excited to kind of bring this kind of, hey, look, holistic, not, a la carte menu, but like this is the program. You're signing up for a program that includes it all.
I love it. It's kind of every fitness professional and trainer's dream to be able to drop their client in that environment and have them go through everything and get every piece. So I'm curious to follow up with you and see how it's going and see what kind of results you're getting, because I'm sure they'll be phenomenal, just like with your athletes.
Yeah, like I said, I think that it really comes down to people want to be told. They really do. I had a guy today who came in. He had a bunch of stuff going on. At the end, I'm like, you got to go do this. You got to go see my massage therapist. I'll see you this day. Like, I just rattled off a whole bunch of things. I didn't even think about what the cost was. I didn't care. He wanted something. And I was like, if you want it, this is what it takes. Yeah. And I just laid it out. The guy's like, okay, great. Set me up.
That's great.
I think most people are really that way. I think most people would be more surprised than not how open people really are to it who are coming to see you as a professional.
Right. No, that's awesome. All right, random question. Happy Gilmore or Caddyshack?
Happy Gilmore.
Nice.
No, I'm joking. You can't say that. Caddyshack is the only.
Oh, you'd be surprised. I've had quite a few guests that have gone the Happy Gilmore route.
Really? No way. Come on.
I'm with you.
I think that's an age thing, probably.
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. All right. Any last pieces of advice for the listeners? And then if you could let them know where they can find you. And obviously, I'll have some of that stuff in the show notes as well.
Yeah. Look, I think if you love playing golf, and it's such an incredible game, not just the game itself, but the friends you can spend time with because of the game and the pace of the game. And look, some people might want to call this speed of the game a negative. I think from being out and playing golf with your friends, playing golf with your family, that's a positive. You're outside. It's beautiful. You're going to spend 4 or 5 hours in a beautiful place with people you care about, with your life. That's what's so great about golf. And it's a game that you can have from 8 to 80 or older. And I think that taking care of your body is really the key. And unfortunately, too many people say, I had a guest on my show, Dr. Lutz, who's the head of physiatry at the Hospital for Special Surgeries here in New York. And he said something really interesting on the show. And it was almost like one of those a-duh moments for me. It was like, he's like, golf's the only game in the world that you play more as you get older.
Yeah.
Right? If you played basketball growing up, when you're 60, you don't play more. It's like people work their whole lives, right? And they're like, when I retire, I'm going to play golf every day.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're a person who loves golf, like taking care of your body and finding a swing style that matches how your body moves is the key to golfing success long term. That is my belief. Take care of your body, and find a swing style that works for you. Don't get caught up in too far. Don't get caught up in what Adam Scott does or Tiger Woods does. Do what you do. Do it really well, and you'll really love the game.
I love it. And where can the audience find you?
Yeah, you can find me in a lot of places.
Google.
You can find me. I mean, obviously, you can check me out on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter at Ben_Shear, SHEAR. You can go to BenShearGolf.com. I'd love to have you check out my radio show, which is this kind of like your podcast, similar. I get lots of really cool guests on. We talk about everything golf. It's called The Golfer's Edge. Monday nights at 7 on PGA Tour Radio, but I think they probably play it 3 or 4 times a week. And if you have it and don't have time for that, they even have on demand where
Nice.
you can pick up the shows even after they've been played. I think those are the main places: Facebook, Twitter, BenShearGolf.com, or my AthleticEdge.net site also. If you want to check out Golf and Body, which is cool, golfandbodynyc.com. That's plenty of places to find me.
I'll have it all linked up in the show, and they'll have links to that stuff, to the radio show, to all the the Athlete's Edge and Golf and Body and all those places. So Ben, just want to say thanks. It's great to finally connect with you and get a chance to hang out and pick your brain a little bit. And I know the 18 Strong listeners got a lot out of this interview.
All right, Jeff. Well, I appreciate you having me, and best of luck with everything. If you need anything else, just let me know.
Thank you much, sir.
All right, be good.
All right, a big thanks to Ben for coming on the show. I know he's a very, very busy guy. As you can tell, he's got several locations that he's bouncing back and forth. He's traveling on the tour. He's got his radio show. He's got all kinds of stuff, and he continues to put out awesome content. So please go check him out at BenShearGolf.com. As I mentioned, I have all the links to all of his different places where you can find him, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff, on the show notes page at 18strong.com/Ben_Shear. And as always, go over to 18 Strong, look up some of the old archived podcasts. We've got great episodes, tons of great guests. If you're new to the podcast, go check it out. And again, I'm going to ask you for those 3 favors. Like the 18 Strong page on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and subscribe to the 18 Strong podcast. And if you want to do me a super favor, leave a review and a rating on iTunes, because again, that just helps to boost the show and spreads the word on 18 Strong and helps make this show even better. All right, guys, I promise to continue to bring some great guests on the 18 Strong podcast. Thank you for showing up. And as always, train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.
Thanks for listening to the 18 Strong podcast at www.18strong.com. And remember, train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.